Does a spider have puss? No!
Welcome back, nerds. Fino here. During our last run through Servant Summer Camp, I missed a few spots. One of them is the perennial coat magnet Saber Tomoe, but today's subject makes for a far less depressing topic. Writer Murasaki. She's a 4-star limited servant and she belongs to a desirable class of single-target arts writers. But how does she measure up to classics like Ryouma and Mandricardo? Let's find out. Leading off Murasaki's kit is Summer Night Black Widow. It's a targeted 1-turn NP seal and 3-turn defense reduction. The seal is chance-based but scales with levels, capping at 100%. As with all NP seals, you can use this immediately and it will prevent your opponent from gaining charge both during and at the end of their turn. I usually pop it when I'm ready to start Murasaki's burst turns, but if you see yourself needing to play for time, the defense debuff lingers long enough to be flexible. Next up is Bizarre Hobby, Summer. It's a targeted defense resistance reduction, skill seal, and arts resistance reduction, all 1-turn effects. Because of its debuff resist effect, you should use Bizarre Hobby before Summer Night Black Widow to make sure your potential effects stick. Murasaki is very debuff reliant, and you should be wary of putting yourself in a position where you can whiff them. Rounding out Murasaki's regular skills is Literary Maiden, Summer. It's an instant startup and 3-turn charge regen effect. At level 10 the ladder is 20%, so getting this leveled up should be a very high priority. And the charge really is the valuable part of this skill. As you've seen, Murasaki has pretty much nothing in the way of crit tools, so all you're really getting out of her crits is more charge the cycler NP. That would be Sotorihime, Spider's Conduct. Currently, this is a single target arch attack with 2 additional effects. The first is a fixed 60% chance to reduce charge, and the second is an overcharge effect that reduces arch resistance for multiple turns. Next year, a bunch of old summer servants get upgrades, and that includes Murasaki. The package has a base damage upgrade for her NP, and it adds on special damage against earth attributes. This puts Murasaki in a very interesting spot, because with this upgrade, her burst damage becomes absurdly high for a 4-star writer, falling just below Nemo's numbers. And if she's on attribute, she blows him out of the water. By contrast, Nemo's special conditions are far trickier, requiring water, a super large enemy, or both. But there is a catch. Typically speaking, you want single target servants as boss killers, and Murasaki can kill them quite effectively, provided they aren't rocking the Jolly Green Giant buff, or as it's otherwise known, debuff immunity. Murasaki has a tremendous amount of her damage tied up in debuffs. If all goes according to plan, no problem. She can stack her NP's arch resistance reduction onto your target of choice, letting you maintain damage even after Bizarre Hobby expires. But the problem with having your kit center around debuffs is that debuff immunity is a common fixture on boss enemies. But it isn't entirely hopeless even in that situation. Upgraded NPs still gain base damage, meaning you can leverage Murasaki as a beatstick even in fights where a kit is largely squandered. But then how does she measure up to the other arts writers? Her most relevant competition comes from the pair of free-to-play servants, Ryouma and Mandricardo. Damage-wise, I'll be focusing on the Ryouma matchup. In a situation where none of Murasaki's debuffs stick and she isn't fighting an earth attribute enemy, Ryouma will damage her at all NP levels. If you account for Castoria's buffs in NP5, the gap drops to around 4k, still in Ryuma's favor. However, if even the defense debuff sticks, Murasaki gains an advantage around NP3. If she also lands one of her arts debuffs, that goes down to NP2. Speaking of which, I want to mention that even though Bizarre Hobby only lasts for 1 turn, Murasaki's overcharge applies a comparable effect. It's lower at 100% overcharge, but because it stacks, you can build up to a stronger overall debuff by turn 3. For these calculations though, I'm assuming turn 2 as Murasaki's least favorable damage case. But what about the case where she whiffs all her debuffs against an earth enemy? Well then her bonus damage does quite a bit of work, giving her the advantage at NP2 and higher. Funny thing about that buff, by the way, attributes actually have interactions with each other, a bit like classes but to a much smaller degree. It's like a 10% swing plus or minus. But you see, Murasaki is a man attribute servant, and the man attribute has a disadvantage against the earth attribute. So her buff counteracts that with a bunch of extra damage to boot. But if for whatever reason you're stuck face carding an enemy without your NP, you'll actually be under a slight penalty. So you'll want to stack the deck to keep her Noble Phantasm chain going. Murasaki has a powerful tool with a recurring battery and arts resistance debuffs, the latter of which act as arts buffs provided you can stick on the same target. This kit is offset, however, by her NP's low hit count. To give Murasaki the best chance of cycling, you'll want to pair it with 2 Castorias for the combination of raw charge and NP gain buffs. Castoria also covers for another of Murasaki's big weaknesses, Survivability. Looking at her kit, you may have noticed that outside of her NP seal and chance-based drain, she has no protection. Certainly no hard mitigation. Round of Avalon can cover for any NPs that slip through the cracks. If your charge generation still isn't good enough, you can run a 3rd supporter and swap them in via plug suit. Oberon is a powerful choice in any fight that you can end decisively, while Waver and Reynas provide longer lasting value. Reynas in particular is an interesting combo since her rider class means she can survive better and contribute more face card damage in fights where you'd be using Murasaki. The Magical Energy Append skill gives Murasaki up to 20% more starting charge, letting you keep more batteries in reserve to smooth out future turns. Her other appends though are suspect. Murasaki doesn't rely on her face cards for damage, dampening the extra card append. Her anti-class append targets alter egos, and that's not a matchup you want to opt into with a rider in the first place. Now consider your Craft Essence loadout. Black Grail is the go-to for most arts attackers, and I see no reason not to run it unless you're forced into something else. Substitutes include Golden Sumo, Holy Night Supper, and the upcoming Ocean Flyer. Since you're fighting casters with Murasaki, she can also benefit from one of the rider class's most useful tools, Origin Bullet. This grants her a substantial anti-caster damage buff and invuln pierce, letting you pin down more stubborn opponents. As per usual, here's the Bonsai. It increases your party's arts and NP gain at the cost of gimping Murasaki with a 100 attack Craft Essence. Obviously that's a deal breaker for offensive builds, but even supportive Murasakis will have better luck with a Star Source like 2030 or Hide Hunter, or something to get her off the field like Guda Guda Poster Girl. Wait, supportive builds? That's right. Murasaki's debuff suite can give another attacker a damage boost, stifle your target's ability to retaliate, and her debuff resistance reduction synergizes with other debuff-dependent servants. For instance, Saber Maeve's Noble Phantasm has a chance to apply multiple defense debuffs. At low overcharge though, each proc is only around a coin flip's chance of happening. Murasaki can stack the deck in Maeve's favor, letting you start the match more explosively. In general though, I dislike the idea of using Murasaki as a support, at least the kind that stays on the field. She only gives charge to herself, so she doesn't really help in the speed department, and as a rider she's extremely star hungry and will claim most of her own star dump unless you're running someone with a powerful absorption skill. Now if you're doing some esports or poster girl shenanigans, you'd have better odds of making that work. While a supportive Murasaki might be too jank, dual attacker setups aren't entirely out of the question. These fell by the wayside for a while, but with the advent of 90++ nodes on JP, you'll often need a combo of a single target and an AoE servant to clear, unless you're running an outrageously strong 120 servant. As for Murasaki, she has solid synergies with 2 other summer servants that you can potentially exploit in the future. Firstly, she's good aligned, meaning she gets the double proc from Archer Jean's attack buff. Secondly, as a summer mode servant, Murasaki benefits from Berserker Ibuki's NP gain steroid. For her part, Ibuki has a star regen effect and an absorption buff, letting her get stars despite Murasaki's presence on the field. But even if she doesn't, Ibuki's crit buffs apply across the board, so either one could use the stars if you're forced to back your NPs up with face cards. Now running Murasaki in a farming node does expose another drawback of using debuffs instead of buffs. Once your target dies, Murasaki's back to square one. You don't get the stacking benefit of repeatedly hitting the same target over multiple turns, getting that arts debuff to build up. Because of this, you're incentivized to hold her second skill for the final wave. For the other waves, you're relying on the anti-earth damage and not much else. Oh, fun side note. Rider Murasaki has one of the weirdest Valentine scenes in the game, and I've been playing bits of it here and there. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend looking it up. It's a blast. I'll try and upload it to the second channel and have a link at the end. So is Rider Murasaki worth rolling for? Answering that's harder than I expected, but I'd say yes overall, especially if you're going to go for NP2 or higher. In most fights, you can get something in your kit to stick, in which case she'll eventually outperform both Ryouma and Mandricardo. And if you get her entire kit to stick, she has the potential to go toe-to-toe with Nemo. Being a gacha servant is a drawback though, and Murasaki gets a triple whammy because she's stuck on a really nasty banner. Get this: Summer Murasaki, Fujino, Summer Abigail, Summer Tomoe. Ugh. Sharing the banner with 2 other 4 stars is extremely unfortunate. I mean, at least Fujino's okay, but Tomoe? We'll have cause to deal with her very soon. And as for Abigail, I already have a guide on her, but suffice to say, she's amazingly bad. You don't have many chances to summon Murasaki. The only chance you'll get outside of summer camp is in 2024's anniversary. On the bright side, that banner only contains Murasaki and Abigail, so you don't have to worry about dealing with multiple SRs. The bad news is that Arquade is introduced on the same anniversary, so you'll have to pick your fights very carefully. Another bit of bad news is that the second banner doesn't have Honey Lake, instead having the anniversary CEs. Honey Lake is very strong, and if you haven't gotten a limit broken copy yet, you may just want to bite the bullet and roll the dice here. But if you have the discipline to wait and save, that's also an option. Thanks for watching. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to see what happens to Summer Tomoe, and come watch me at twitch.tv/Finotaisen, where I stream every weekend, 3 p.m. Pacific time, Friday through Sunday. I'll be taking a shot at the Berserker fight this weekend, among others. The link on screen will take you to the fate of Sleepy Abbey, one of FGO's more unfortunate escapades in gameplay design. See you there.